I suppose that's the nutshell introduction for me. But after that nutshell, I am going to go to my presentation because I am a little bit ADD like a lot of us sometimes are, and if I could go off on tangents and we'd be here all afternoon. So part of my introduction is in here. This is our clinic, or this was our clinic, I should say. This was a picture from our old clinic when I opened in 2008 with a business partner of mine. But I don't know if you can see it. I think I have a picture of it. But back in the day, I had our mission on the wall of the clinic, which was to work with and through His design, being God's design, to restore and maintain health in His creations. Because that's sort of like when we talk about healing by design, that was the point of the conversation, right? Is how do we heal? But the key word there is by design, right? Working with God's design, not in spite of God's design, right? Sometimes I think that's funny. As a society, we find fascination in something. Like let's say we're a kid and we find like this toy truck, and the more we learn about the toy truck, we're like, oh, this is really cool. But to assume that you own the toy truck as a child is a little presumptuous, or like you created the toy truck, or you designed it, you know? And I think sometimes in healthcare, there's a bit of that. We get so smart and we get so intellectual and we get so clinical that we forget that it's God's design. You know, it reminds me of the joke of the atheist and the creationist. Or no, what was it? The atheist and God were having a conversation. The atheist said, I can do what you do. I can build a universe out of nothing. And God said, oh, really? That's fascinating. How would you do that? He goes, well, I'll take this dirt and I'll take this water. And God said, hold on, let me stop you right there. That's my dirt. You know? And so I think in healthcare, it's similar. We get pretty smart, right, over the decades of time, and we get pretty intellectual. We get pretty good at this stuff. But we shouldn't forget where it all comes from. You know what I mean? And I think that's why in the beginning I was kind of attracted to chiropractic, because it kind of, like some Eastern medicines, it like recognizes, Eastern. It recognizes that life is intelligent fundamentally, you know. And then myself as a Christian, it's God's intelligence, you know. And we'll talk a bit about that, because I think it's important for you as a patient in healthcare to kind of have that perspective. But then we can also talk about it, how some of these advancements in how the human body works really helps validate our worldview from a creationistic standpoint. So I kind of wanted to talk about that too, which would be kind of fun. Going back to my little bit of ADD bouncing around personality type, the strength in that personality type is I am A-okay with you interrupting me. If you have a question and you're like, oh, what about that? Or I thought I heard about that, or whatever, just stop me. Just raise your hand and we'll have a conversation about it. I've asked the powers that be that if someone is watching the live stream and they have a question, they can go in and type away, text the line, what have you, and someone will flag me down. So please do stop me when we do that. We'll probably spend about half an hour to an hour on this stuff, and then we'll go have lunch, and that'll be fun. Let's see. Oh, that was me in 2008. So that's baby-faced Bulow back in the day. But this is really my crew that helped me start the practice. My youngest, Taylor, is all the way to the right. She would be really upset that she wasn't able to make it today. They were supposed to be here. My wife got some sort of a stomach bug last night, so she's on apple cider vinegar and activated charcoal. Some things that help out there. But yeah, they were with us in the very, very beginning. We started in 2008. We now practice in the Rowan Tower, which is this building up in Cranberry Township. And I have the help of Dr. Emily Savage, who's a recent addition to the clinic. And we do some pretty advanced work that we'll talk about. I mean, like I said, I want to talk about the fundamentals of healthcare. That way we could have conversations about a little bit of anything. But at the end, we'll talk a little bit more about that type of work. But this is what we're going to cover. We're going to cover understanding healthcare, so kind of reevaluating healthcare in general. It's a conversation that Des, now you don't get to answer the questions, Des, because you know all the answers then, because we had a similar presentation up in Cranberry, and it's just a fun Socratic sort of conversation about healthcare that helps us be better educated patients. When we go to any doctor or therapist, we know what kind of questions to ask and kind of how to filter the information that we're getting. we do need to redefine health a little bit and what it means to be healthy. And then, like I said, I'll mention a little bit about what I do professionally, which is generally known as upper cervical care. Anytime you say the word chiropractor, most people think about cracking backs and necks and stuff, and that's not what we do. So a lot of times we just call it upper cervical care. But let's get started on the back and forth. Like I said, I like interaction. So these are not, what's the name of a question when you don't really want the answer? What's that called? Rhetorical. These are not rhetorical questions. See, you already participated. That's good. So here's the first question. If we're going to be discussing healthcare, we have to figure out why people go to doctors in the first place. So if I ask you that, what would you say? Why do people go to the doctor? What do we think? Not rhetorical.
I think because they are not healthy. And
Yeah.
the reason is because they think they are not healthy.
Sure. So either we're not healthy or we think we're not healthy. So what does that look like, not being healthy? How would you know if you're not healthy? Pain? Yeah, that's a pretty good one. What else? Why else do people go to the doctor? They're in pain? Yeah? All right, fair enough. I'll interpret that as saying fatigue. She said when I'm fatigued. And I got positive eye rub sign. That's what we called it when we were having our kids. We in healthcare, we have very scientific terms, right? You know, positive eye rub sign. It's kind of like saying fibromyalgia. Sounds good, but what is it? Well, that's pain in your muscle fibers. And you say, well, I could have told you that, right? All right, so we got pain, fatigue. What else? Digestion, congestion. Yeah, congestion, right? Especially this time of year with allergies and stuff like that. At the end of the day, it's because we've got some sort of symptomatology that we don't like. And we are saying, I must not be healthy because I'm dragging my foot, or I can't go to the bathroom, or I'm not sleeping at night, right? That's usually why. Most people don't go to the doctor because they enjoy it. So like, hey, I feel great today. I'm going to the doctor just to spend my Saturday. No. When do people go to the doctor? Now, not why. So it's a little bit of a trick question. When do they go? What do we think?
Last resort.
What was it?
Last resort.
Last resort. Absolutely. Well, actually, I just flashed the answers. What's the first thing that they do? Look on the internet. Dr. Google, right? Yeah. Fix it, yeah. When I was in chiropractic college, you have to appreciate, chiropractors are one of the earlier alternative healthcare methodologies. And one of the other reasons I got into it was my mom. She was very natural minded, you know. So when I was in chiropractic college, I was like the MacGyver of healthcare. I use that analogy, but I know half the people in this generation, below my generation, may not even know who MacGyver was. But MacGyver was like this crazy, military cop guy, and he would build things and out of nothing, you know. So when we're sick, most of us go to Google and figure out what's the home remedy for my pain? What's the home remedy for my congestion? What can I mix together with baking soda and cure my cancer, you know? So when do we go? Well, we usually go when everything we've tried on our own isn't working. Then we say, fine, I'll go to the doctor. Now, some of the things, by the way, that we try on our own are some of these things, the over-the-counter things too. I was the MacGyver of vitalistic healthcare, but most people in society may not go for the natural stuff. They just might look for a Tylenol, you know what I mean? That's another commercial. I watched too much TV as a kid. How do you spell Rolaids? R-E-L, relief? What was that? Was that the one? It was this commercial. It said, how do you spell relief? Oh, that was it. How do you spell relief? R-O-L-A-I-D-S. Rolaids. So when this stuff doesn't work, we say, fine, we'll go to the doctor. Next question. What do we expect to get from the doctor? A miracle, a cure. How? How are they going to cure us? Medicine, right? Medicine or surgery. That's really what, at least in the United States, that's what most doctors do, is we prescribe something. But we could have gotten it on our own, right? Like, what's the difference between the medication that you get from the doctor and the medication that you get over the counter? Stronger. Yeah, absolutely. There we go, more powerful drug. Because that's why you go to school. You go to school, and by the way, pharmacists have some of the highest malpractice insurance because you're playing with very powerful chemicals, right? And you better know what you're doing because they have serious effects on the human body. But when we want the miracle cure, right, and we want the treatment, we want the good stuff, that's why we go. To get something that's stronger, that's going to finally get me back to work, that's going to knock this infection out, that's going to take my pain away, that's going to give me some sleep, right? That's usually something that's not available to me over the counter. By the way, if these are stronger, they carry with them usually this thing that we call side effects, right? That's like the stuff that they rattle off at the end of the drug ad. May cause blah, 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 blah. So here's the final question, one of the final ones. I guess the red, unfortunately, I didn't edit my PowerPoint well enough and it got lost down here. If I'm sick, if I wake up and I've got this pain or I'm fatigued or I'm congested or whatever I am, I try and fix it on my own and it doesn't work. I know. And so I go to the doctor and they give me a prescription that has side effects. In other words, it's causing another problem that I then have to manage. How is it that it at the same time is making me healthy? Like the thing that makes me sick, how can it also make me healthy at the same time? That's a hard one to answer, right? Because we need it. By the way, my daughter's a type 1 diabetic. Thank goodness for insulin, right? She's got the pump, she's got the sensor. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying, how is it that it causes a restoration of health? And the reality is that it doesn't. It's a disease management vehicle. It's something by which I can control or eliminate disease that's present in my body, but it's not like it enhances how healthy I am. I mean, if standard medications made me healthier, then the person who took the most medications that you know would be the healthiest person that you know. Or we just give it all to that little girl in the third aisle, right? We'd take all of our medicine from medicine cabinet and say, hey, we want you to grow up healthy, so we're going to start giving you medications right now, right? Or we give it to pregnant women, but we don't because they're risky. We only should do it as a last resort whenever we really need it, like my daughter with the diabetes or someone who needs the migraine to go away to drive to work, right? I'm not passing judgment. I'm just saying we interpret it as being a health restoration kind of thing when it's not. It's more of like a disease management sort of thing. So I actually think it's not labeled correctly. This thing in healthcare that we call, well, the thing in society that we call healthcare is probably better suited to be called health or sick care. Because you said we go when we're sick, not when we're healthy, right? And we either have chronic symptoms like we talked about. We have a disease like diabetes or some sort of an infectious disease. Or maybe it's a trauma, you know what I mean? Maybe we get in a car accident and we're bleeding out of the ears. Thank goodness for modern medicine, right? Again, I'm not saying it's not good. I'm just saying this is where it shines, is in the management of symptoms, diseases, and traumas. In times of crisis, where there's a lot of risk, the medications do carry some risk with them. I don't think I have it in this presentation, but does anyone know what the leading cause of death is in the United States every year? Heart disease is number one. Yeah, heart disease number one. Number two? Cancer. Yep, heart disease and cancer. Number one and number two. Last I checked, heart disease was about 500,000 people a year. Cancer was around there. Then you go down a bit, and the third, if we were to actually look at the stats, is something called iatrogenic disease. Anyone know what iatrogenic disease is? It's medically induced illness. So when we go, everyone here ever hear the cure is worse than the condition? That's iatrogenic disease. And again, I'm not passing judgment, I'm not vilifying it, I'm not saying sometimes we need these things. What I'm saying is this model of healthcare is a serious model of healthcare. Really, what I'm redefining as sick care is it's to be respected. And I think sometimes we go in guns blazing wanting medications and surgery when it's like we should really hold that off for the times of crisis, because over time this stuff has downsides too, and it carries with it risk, you know? And if there was, basically iatrogenic disease, last I checked, was about 120,000 deaths a year, which is about the same thing as 6 airplanes falling out of the sky and crashing every other day. And if you had that happening in society, you would probably stop air traffic control. Like you'd say, all right, we're not going to fly anymore. You know what I mean? But a lot of people die every year from just medical errors, accidents, overdoses, properly taken medications, you know? And I just think fundamentally as a society, sometimes we get a little bit of pill happy, and it's good to have these discussions just so that we're being real and being honest that like, okay, every once in a while is fine, but if we're going to be taking 6 different prescriptions for the rest of our life, we should stop and evaluate, is there something else I could be doing so I can actually restore my health? Or am I just going to be stuck this way, managing this disease for the rest of my life and chasing the side effects for eternity? You know what I mean? Now, healthcare then would be something that would boost our health. You know what I mean? Like, what do I do to be healthy? How do I enhance my health? Which is not actually a tough question. I could probably ask most anybody, even like grade school kids, how do you become healthy? How do you grow up big and strong? And what are they going to say? How do you become healthy? Exercise, eat right? Apple a day, keeps the doctor away, that kind of stuff. Nothing crazy. The hard thing about healthcare, let me back up a minute. The hard thing about healthcare in taking care of your health is it's simple little things done consistently over time. And what I've learned is that things that are easy to do in life are easy not to do in life, right? Like an apple a day keeps the doctor away, like I said. That's so easy that it's easy to be like, well, I mean, it's just an apple. I don't really have to have that today. I'll have it tomorrow. You know what I mean? Or I'll have, instead of an apple, I'll have like a Twinkie instead. You know, like, and we can just change it over time. What do you got, Beecher?
My brother eats an apple a day.
Whoop, whoop. Yeah. So it requires consistency. It requires proactivity. By the way, you see this thing about out of pocket and least expensive? These are interesting financial conversations. Like a lot of times we base our healthcare decisions based on if it's in network or out of network. But it's kind of a funny thing, you know, if you said, and this happened to me one time, I had a patient come in that said I had a headache all day today. I ran my indicators on them, couldn't find anything wrong with them from what I do. I said, headache all day. All right, well, I mean, it doesn't look like it's coming from your spine, because I do spine stuff. I said, how much water did you have today? And they said, does coffee count? And I said, no. Coffee is a diuretic. Coffee will actually make you lose water in your body. And I like coffee, but you got to drink a lot of water with it. I said, well, you may be dehydrated, because one of the common symptoms of dehydration is fatigue, headache, body aches. And I'm like, you're looking fine. Like in our tests, everything looks good. Why don't you go home, get a glass of water on your way out. We'll see where you're at later in the week. And sure enough, she was fine. Next visit in, you were right, went home, had some water, it was fine. So now here's my question. What if she called her insurance company and be like, yo, I bought a case of water at Giant Eagle on my way home because my doctor told me to buy new water. I've got my receipt for $10 for the case of water. I'd like to send it in for my insurance reimbursement. The insurance company is going to be like, oh, yeah, sorry, we don't cover water. But they'll cover like the Imitrex or the Vicodin to treat the headache, but they won't cover the water that got to the cause of the headache. You know what I mean? It's almost like the car insurance company not covering your brakes to be changed, but they might step in if you get in an accident when you lose your brakes, right? It's very reactive, it's not proactive. And that's where it becomes out of pocket, because healthcare isn't based on the diagnosis you have. It's based on what do I need to do to be as healthy as I can be, regardless of what I have. See what I'm saying? It's a fascinating redefinition. You know, the founder, one of the developers of chiropractic said, medicine is the study of diseases and what makes a man die, and chiropractic is the study of life and health and what makes a man live. And it's not just chiropractic, it could be nutrition, any of these vitalistic healthcare options that are out there. But my point is, that's really healthcare. When they say chiropractors are alternative healthcare, no, we're not, we're healthcare. You know what I mean? Because it's really boosting your health. And I just think that's an important thing whenever you are going out and wanting to restore your health. That's what you should strive for. How do I become better tomorrow than I am today? Not how do I manage this symptom. By the way, we have to redefine the word health then. Because if by most definitions, if I said, how do I know if I'm healthy? We would probably rattle off the opposite of what we said earlier. So no pain, lots of energy, stuff like that. But then you'd have a condition like diabetes or heart disease or cancer, remember? Top leading causes of death. How did those people feel before they had the heart attack or before they got the diagnosis of cancer? If you've ever known someone that's had those diagnoses, does it surprise them? A lot of times it does. You know what I mean? Like the heart attack obviously surprises them. But the cancer leading up to it, by the way, breast cancer, by the time they can detect it on a mammogram, it's been growing in the body for about 10 years at least. Because the cells have to replicate big enough to the size that the sensor picks it up. So were they healthy in those 10 years before it got diagnosed? They probably felt healthy, but there's something wrong in the body, you know? Or the person who has the heart attack felt great, then killed over on the golf course. So were they healthy? You know, so it's kind of hard. It's kind of hard to base health off of the absence of symptoms. By the way, I can give you the opposite definition. Let's say I am healthy, right? By most definitions. My wife, for example, I don't know why. Overnight last night, she starts throwing up and going to the bathroom a lot. So we're thinking it might be food poisoning, right? Let's say we don't know what it is. We're throwing up a lot. We go to the doctor, and they say, here's some Pepto-Bismol, here's some kaopectate, some things to stop you from throwing up and to stop you from going to the bathroom. But let's say you actually have food poisoning. What then happens? You get septic, right? The poison gets into your body. And that actually happened to a colleague of mine, his parents, for Thanksgiving dinner one time. They had these issues. They got septic. They went to the hospital. They were properly diagnosed with food poisoning, and they were detoxed, right? But here's the point, though. What should a healthy body do when it ingests poison? Get rid of it. But what do we call it? Sick. Isn't that funny? It's just interesting to me. So we can have symptoms and be healthy in that food poisoning example, you know? But we can also have no symptoms and have like a sickness growing inside of us. And then obviously we can feel good and be healthy, and we can feel crappy and be sick. My point is, how we feel isn't always the best metric for how healthy we are, you know? So we almost have to have this redefinition and understanding of what it means to be healthy. One of the World Health Organization's definitions over the past years was health was a state of complete social, physical, and mental well-being. Spiritual well-being, I think, might be in there as well. That's the World Health Organization. They're too prestigious for that. But I'd throw in there spiritual too. And not just the absence of disease or infirmity, right? So if I'm as complete and whole as I can be, physically, emotionally, spiritually, I'll probably be as healthy as I can be. By the way, can you find that in the bottom of a prescription jar? That's my last conversation about modern medicine, but it's not, but I mean that sincerely. Wouldn't it be nice, though, if we could write a prescription for health? Like take 500 milligrams of health and call me in the morning. You know what I mean? So here's where it gets really kind of fun, is if we agree that our modern institutions are more disease management, which, by the way, we need in a society, that's fine, but it's not really designed to make us healthy, then we have to then ask, where does health come from? If I can't get it in a bottle, where does it come from? Here's a fun question, another non-rhetorical one. If I cut myself, or you cut yourself like a paper cut, I'm sure everybody's done that, right? Do you have to go in a dark corner and think about clotting the blood and forming new skin in your finger? It does it automatically, right? So where does it get the ability to do that? It really comes from within, because all living things have that ability. Every living thing, by the way, if I cut a rock, I break it in half, it doesn't heal. But if I cut the arm of a human being or a squirrel or even a tree, to a certain extent, it's going to heal. So this is where the conversation starts to get fun, because if health is a byproduct of living things, now we get to ask the question, well, then where does life come from? This is where it gets kind of fun for me. And Des, I don't even think we had this slide the last time, because this is like what kind of drew me to chiropractic, is because it fundamentally It has a vitalistic philosophy that life is perfect and intelligent, right? And that's where we get our health from, is from the fact that we're alive. We should be healthy, right? So, but the question then still comes from, where does it come from? And in chiropractic, we have this term called innate intelligence. And all it means is that the human body is innately intelligent. It's there from the day you're born. And by the way, it's infinite and it's perfect. And that everybody has it. All living things have this infinite and perfect intelligence, right? Now, when I think about an infinite and perfect intelligence, or when you think about an infinite and perfect intelligence, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Oh, see, I was going to say Dr. Bilo, but no, God, yeah. You know what was fun? Is I used to give this presentation years ago. I haven't done it in a long time. I would pause, and no one would want to answer that question. I'd say, when you think about an infinite and perfect intelligence, what's the first thing that comes to mind? And I'd be saying this in my office to a bunch of new patients that were new to the practice and whatever, and I'd say, well, Dr. Bulow, and then they'd laugh, and I'd say, well, no, it's God, right? But we can't say God in a clinic. Like, oh, we're too professional, right? And that goes back to what I was saying in the beginning. As a society, we've gotten so full of ourselves that we can't humble ourselves and recognize that we're not the center of the universe. You know what I mean? Like, give me a break. Mathematically speaking, life doesn't exist, and that on its own, and that's what I'm going to get at here. So if we're redefining health as being a byproduct of life, and we're saying that life is something that comes from a creator, we have to be able to prove that to a certain extent, which I love to do, and I'm going to do that. So we're going to prove God, and or at least intelligent design to a certain extent, and I'm going to do all of that using a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Where's Beecher? You like PB&J sandwiches? Yeah? When you eat a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and it gets down to your stomach, there are specific acids designed to break down the proteins, the carbohydrates, and the fats, right? And then there are enzymes that grab a hold of those molecules, the proteins, the carbohydrates, and the fats, and carry it over into your bloodstream. And then the bloodstream goes, and the nutrients go from your intestines into the bloodstream out to wherever your body needs it to be, maybe to fix that cut, right? So when you eat your food, you don't think about those chemical reactions, right? You're not thinking about digesting everything and all that kind of stuff. It happens automatically, right? Those chemical reactions are just a handful of examples of chemical reactions that are taking place in your entire body. You have 75 trillion cells in your entire body on average, and in each of those single cells, there's estimated to be 200,000 chemical reactions taking place in each cell, right? So how many chemical reactions do you think are taking place in your body at any given moment of the day? Who's got a really big calculator to run the math on that one? I'll do it for you. 1.5 times 10 to the 19, otherwise known as infinite. There are an infinite amount of things taking place in your body right now that, by the way, you have no conscious control over. If I asked you how many times your heart beat in the last 20 minutes that we've been talking, you would think you would know, right? It's kind of irresponsible if you don't, right? Or how many times you breathe, or what your blood pressure is, or what your sugar regulation is, right? And those infinite chemical reactions, what are they doing? They're keeping you alive, right? And by the way, they're highly organized. If you don't digest that PB&J sandwich properly before it gets into your bloodstream, you ever hear leaky gut syndrome? Anyone ever hear that? That's whenever your stomach isn't breaking down the food right. So these proteins that aren't digested perfectly get into your bloodstream prematurely. And then your immune system's like, yo, who are you? And it attacks that protein. So now you get these autoimmune diseases. You ever see someone with like the rashes and the stuff on the outside of their skin? Chances are it's a gut problem because their immune system's all revved up, beaten up rogue proteins that weren't properly digested, right? It's not the fault of the skin, and you could cover it up with a bunch of lotions and salves and all that, but if you don't clean up the chemical reactions internally, that problem's just going to present itself again and again and again and again and again. So it's very clear to me. Oh, I almost forgot one other fun analogy. Remember these infinite chemical reactions that are happening very organized? There's one final thing with this God conversation. Anytime you see something that is organized in your life, I don't care what it is, you can assume that there's an intelligence responsible for that organization. Like when you're a kid and you go downstairs and breakfast is made, that wasn't an accident. That was your parent. You know what I mean? There was an intelligent and loving parent who made you breakfast, you know? If I tried to build a human body using a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, I would fail miserably. But the intelligence of creation does that every moment of every day that you eat. Your body takes that, breaks it down, forms new skin cells, forms new heart cells, forms new liver cells. When you were being born, when you were being developed in your mother's womb, she had pickles and ice cream for 9 months, right? And you came out all right. But that's all infinite intelligence, right? So if I want to be 100% healthy, oh, hold on, I'm sorry, I got to go back here one more second. In that process, by the way, how many people know this, but when the sperm and an egg meet for the first time, you have this new life that forms. The first organ that gets developed by the Creator is actually the brain and spinal cord. It's called the primitive streak. It's what eventually becomes your brain and your spinal cord. And that becomes protected by bone. Your brain is the only organ in the body completely protected by bone. That's kind of interesting to think about. You know, your heart's important and your lungs, so they're protected by your ribs and all that good stuff. But your brain is the only one completely surrounded by bone. It's got some holes in it for your eyes and your spinal cord and your ears, but otherwise it's a solid vault of bone, which is kind of neat. And that's what connects all the different organs to one another. And after 9 months with pickles and ice cream, we now have a 75 trillion celled little toddler right there that can poop and pee and crawl and do all kind of stuff without us even regulating it and thinking about it. That's pretty flippin' cool if you ask me. So in my world, if I want to be 100% of my fullest genetic potential, then I've got to make sure that whatever intelligence is running this body is doing it the best that it can. Remember I talked about the importance of good nutrition? That if you don't have a healthy lining of your gut, you can have those autoimmune diseases and that sort of thing. The crazy thing is you can live without food for a certain amount of time. How long can you go without food? Jesus went for like 40 days, but I don't know if we're as good as him. But yeah, I can go for like a week. That's about my max. What do you think, Beecher? What's that? I think you're probably right. I think it's probably 3-4 weeks, somewhere in there. What about water? How long can you go without water?
3 days.
I think you're right. You're talking days. I think you might, I can't remember exactly what water is. It's like, it's not long. It's maybe a week max, somewhere in there, and before your kidneys start shutting down, bad stuff happens. How long can you hold your breath? Go without oxygen. What do you think, Beach?
I reckon like maybe 15 seconds.
15 seconds? I don't know.
Maybe 10.
There are some magicians that can go for minutes, you know? Yeah. You can go out without oxygen for a certain amount of minutes. How long can you go without impulses from your brain? What do you think, Beach?
You can't.
You can't. Yeah, no, you really can't. If I break my neck and I sever the connection from my head to my heart stops beating like that, right? I'm done. I shut off. I die. You know what's really crazy is someone actually, their heart can stop beating and they can be brought back to life. The reality is they didn't die. Their heart stopped beating. Their brain waves are still kicking. And if you can resuscitate that heart and get it beating again and restore oxygen to the brain, that person can survive. But if the lack of oxygen starves the brain long enough and the brain shuts off, barring a divine miracle, that person's not coming back, right? The brainstem is the first thing that forms when the sperm and egg meet, and it's the last thing to turn off when you die. Because when that turns off, that's physically we're done, right? Unless, again, we've got some sort of a divine intervention. So if my goal is to be 100% healthy, I want to maximize the brain's health and its ability to run those infinite chemical reactions, because that's the job of the brain. The brain is God's organ that basically is like the thermostat on that wall. It's the ultimate thermostat. Like if it gets cold in here, you start shivering. Why? Because your brain realizes that it's getting cold from the sensors in here. They go up to the brain, say, hey, it's cold. The brain goes back, tells the muscles to start quaking, and we start warming up. If it's hot outside, we start sweating. If you eat a jelly donut, you should produce insulin, right? If you don't do those things, then you get hyperthermia, hypothermia, diabetes. Like every condition that you can think of is ultimately a lack in the body's ability to adapt to that thing. Remember how we said we don't want to just take drugs for the rest of our life? The reason is because we should figure out why the body isn't dealing with that thing. Like someone who gets a headache every time it rains outside, or their hip hurts every time it rains outside. You know, they're like a human barometer. If that was universal, if it was just the rain, we all would get a migraine every time it rained outside. Or all of us, our hip would hurt. But that's not the issue. The issue is our body's not responding to that stress. Why not? That's the question that we should all ask ourselves, is why are we not dealing with this healing from this thing? And we can give our body great nutrition because our body needs nutrition to build and heal, right? But fundamentally for me, a great starting place is asking, is that brain in full control over those 75 trillion cells? Because ultimately it's doing stuff that I can't even calculate. So I at least have to start there. I'm going to show you a couple other things. The brain is protected by the skull, like I mentioned, and the upper neck bones. The upper neck bones are actually pretty unique. They allow for you to do all of this funny movement here. You can look around. It's a super duper flexible area. The problem is that most of us in life have accidents and injuries that strain and sprain the ligaments and connective tissue that holds the head on top of the spine. And that leaves behind a weakness there. Sometimes you feel it, sometimes you don't. Some people feel it like a toothache right up here. But other times it might irritate the vagus nerve that goes to your stomach, and your stomach gets upset every time you eat, or you have diarrhea, or you have constipation. Toddlers, little infants, oh my gosh. If there are cesarean births where you're pulled out of the mom through a little hole in the belly, that happens, I can almost promise you, every time, where you're just getting yanked. So all those ligaments get stretched and damaged, and we wonder why the baby has colic, or they're not sleeping well, or they have chronic ear infections. It's because the nerve that controls that is being stressed to the max. But if we could look inside, it would look like that, where there'd be little tears in the connective tissue. And now that can happen, like I said, through cesarean sections. And by the way, sometimes people mistakenly think that C-sections are actually easier than natural birth. You know what I mean? Like, oh, a piece of cake. You're just going to, like a zipper, right, in the mom's stomach. You're just going to open the zipper, you're going to lift the baby out, and you're going to set the baby here, you know. All three of my girls were cesarean section. So again, I don't say anything with judgment. I'm just stating facts, but it's no judgment. Sometimes you need to have a cesarean, sometimes you need medication, no big deal. But I'm just telling you, it's highly traumatic. Like a natural birth, the baby is being pushed through the birth canal. That's why they have the soft spots, so their head actually squeezes in like a cone head. It's another 80s reference. I don't know how many people will get it. But where their head will be like a torpedo. Cesarean, there's no pushing. It's all pulling. Mom's turned off. Like they put drugs in you that you're not contributing to that event at all. And it's just the doctor pulling, using the baby's head for leverage. Just like popping a cork out of a wine bottle. And it's not designed to do that, right? God made the soft spots, and the bones, by the way, aren't fully formed either. The bones in the neck are almost like gummy lifesaver rings, you know? They're cartilage. So if I took a gummy bear or a gummy worm or a gummy ring and I squeezed it, that really wouldn't do any damage to it. But if I took that same thing and I pulled it, that sucker can rip. That sucker can tear. You know what I mean? So this baby's neck has like Gumby bones designed to be pushed, not to be pulled. Right? So the pulling there is very, very traumatic. By the way, see the lightning bolt on the left? The reason that's there is because you've got this brain-to-body communication that flows through that area. That's where that infinite intelligence is running our life. And I just stressed the daylights out of it. And so now what happens is that baby maybe doesn't sleep through the night. You know, they cry a lot when they eat. They're diagnosed with colic. We go, what do? When we go to we have a problem. We go to the doctor. And we get our antacids, so the colic goes away. We say, oh, great. But if we're running at 80% of our potential over the next 3, 6, 12 months of life, maybe now our ears start to get all funny. And then we say, oh, they got an ear infection. What do? Go back to the doctor. Well, that's okay. Some kids get ear infections, some kids don't. No big deal. Here's some antibiotics. And then this cycle just continues over and over and over again because we never stop to think, is the life source getting through? Is the connection between the brain and the body getting through? How about whenever we slip and we fall and we be kids? You know what I mean? Like, kids are kids. We're going to climb trees. We're going to ride bikes. How many people have stitches on their head or their forehead, right? Like somewhere in here, you know what I mean? That's called life, you know what I mean? Again, no judgment. We all do it. But it probably just stresses some things out. Or how about this one? Football in the last 10 years has become a really big deal. How many people saw the movie Concussion with Will Smith? Anyone see that movie? It's really cool. It was based out of Pittsburgh, but it was about these football players in the 70s, right? The Steelers and other players doing that, head-to-head collisions. And those guys now are in their like 50s and 60s, and a lot of them have like dementia, depression, suicidality, memory loss, right? And that's why, I don't know if you caught this, but like 10 years ago, the NFL Players Association was suing the NFL because they're saying, you guys knew about the risks and you didn't tell us as players. They called it chronic traumatic encephalopathy. Remember I said medicine's got some really fancy words? Chronic traumatic encephalopathy just means you have an inflamed brain from having lots of trauma to it, right? That's this. Car accidents, yeah. Car accidents are a big one. The problem with car accidents is most people, unless they're like visibly bleeding, are just given some muscle relaxers and sent home. But if you've got that instability in your spine that just locks out of place and just irritates the daylights out of that area, then over time, that's where people eventually have a lot of these problems. I can promise you clinically, the people that have had most of these issues in life develop a lot of arthritis in their spine because it's not stable, so you get the bone spurs and the bulging herniated discs and all that. And they also, uncoincidentally, are the people that also have the most medications because their body's just not running right. Like if I clog an artery, it's bad for wherever that artery goes. If I clog one of the holes where those nerves come out, it's bad for anywhere those nerves go. So the more clogged the spine is, it's just like having clogged arteries. It shuts down how well your body operates. So from my perspective, the next question is, how would we know if our problem is due to a misalignment or an instability in the spine versus due to my genetics, versus due to my gut, versus due to my stinking thinking, or any of these other things that could get in the way of our body running to God's design, right? It's a tough question. It's a fair question. You know what I mean? How would we know? In our office, we do a few things. We do thermal imaging. Thermal imaging is a way of measuring skin temperature because skin temperature is something your brain controls. Anyone ever get really angry and their face turns beet red? Or know someone who's gotten really angry and their face turns beet red, right? That's an example of how your nerves control your skin temperature. Or if you're nervous, you get like sweaty palms or the hair stands up on the back of your neck. Those are all examples of how your nerves and your brain controls your skin surface. So in our work, we measure that because if the nerves are agitated, we'll see that right away. It's the same reason a cardiologist measures your blood pressure. They don't wait for a heart attack to happen. They measure your blood pressure to see if you're at risk of a heart attack, right? We could wait until someone has chronic pain or problems or all the things we mentioned in the beginning, but we like to measure the skin surface because we can tell in advance if that body is under neurological distress by doing that. Has anyone ever seen those temporal thermometers? They're handheld like this and you put it up to a baby's forehead and measure their temperature. It's that technology, just a little better. And you can do this on yourselves. Like, it's not as fancy as our scanner, it's not as accurate, but you can take that thermometer and stick it on the left side of your neck and see what it reads as, or stick it on the right side of your neck and see what it reads as, or put it on your left wrist or your right wrist. You should be the same within a half a degree. You should be the same. If you're a degree hotter or colder on one side of your body than on the identical other side, that's a big problem, especially in on the neck. Now, we measure in Celsius and we get really analytical with ours because if you look, see the little crooked yellow lines right there? Those are basically the same thing as the colored bars at the top. It's just a different way to look at it. And in our clinic, we check people over time. And if that irritation or that temperature difference isn't going away, that's when we step in and do a clinical intervention. If it's changing, then that's life. Some days, you might have a headache if you don't drink that water. You know what I mean? This keeps us from just chasing symptoms. You know what I mean? Is if this is changing over time, we know that body's just doing as best it can. And that's all we can ask for when our goal is health, is to boost the body's ability to do its best it can. But that's our main tool that we use. We look at posture. Posture is a big deal. The weight of your head absolutely dictates your posture. Has anyone ever ridden a unicycle? I never have. Have you? Have you really? You try? What's that? Yes. Who has? Over here, I missed you. Fantastic. That's very rare. But if you were riding on the unicycle, right, there's one center of gravity, and if my head goes like this, I'm probably going to do this to kind of like counterbalance it, right? Or even if you were on, say, walking along a boat, and the boat leans to the right in the ocean, for example, you might lean to the left so you don't fall off the boat. You know what I mean? It's the exact same thing with your head. If I've got a misalignment, I've got a damaged spine, and this bowling ball of a head is tilted like this, I can almost promise you this shoulder is going to go up. And it's to reset your center of gravity. Now, by the way, the muscles that do that are located right in here. And how many people do we know, I hold my stress right here? Or can you just massage me right there? It's probably because this 10-pound, 14-pound bowling ball isn't centered over the shoulders the way that it should be. You want another fun at-home test to see if this is going on? Get 2 bathroom scales, as long as they're calibrated, right? Put them down, put 1 foot on one scale, 1 foot on the other scale. And just stand nice and tall and wiggle around and kind of reset and then look down. It should be the same. A lot of times you'll find that people are carrying 5, 10, 15 extra pounds on one side. And then we wonder why that knee always goes out, or that hip is giving us some trouble, or why we have the sciatic down the leg. Because if my head goes this way and my shoulders go this way, now I'm going to be walking a little differently. I'm not going to be carrying my weight evenly on both sides, right? And we can test that standing up with people. Oh, here's another fun one, standing up, by the way. Have someone march in place, stand nice and tall, and then look at their thumbs. Because if your shoulders are like this, one thumb will be lower down on the pants than the other thumb. You know who it's easiest to see with? Are kids, grade schoolers. Because they haven't had like the years of like compensations. So like a 10-year-old is either going to be perfect or terrible. There's no in between. And don't tell them what you're doing. Just say, hey, I want to see how tall you are. Stand right there. March in place, look up, look down. Right, all right, now look at me. And then look down at their thumbs. Don't tell them you're looking at their thumbs, but just look at their thumbs. And then have them walk around the room and do it again. And then do it next week and do it the week after. If it doesn't change, there's a problem there. You know, we were going to, I'll give you an example, excuse me, of how this works. Now this is a pretty extreme example of like full-blown scoliosis, right? Now, scoliosis obviously is a twisting of the spine, but what I want you to notice, these yellow lines that are running through the pictures are running straight up from your sitting bone called the sacrum. It's what you sit on. Your head should be over your sacrum. If your head is way over here, you're probably going to have problems in your hip, you're probably going to have problems in your back, et cetera, et cetera. So this picture on the left, what you'll notice is that the center of the head is off that center of gravity point by a lot. This one in here was a few months after the onset of care, and it stayed that way ever since, which is pretty cool, right? Now, this is X-ray. Not everyone has the benefit of having that kind of study done, but that's why I said the bathroom scales and the photographs and things like that. And then, by the way, that very same person you can also look at how that affects the neurology in that area. So this is someone we've been taking care of over a period of time. Their first assessment was in May last year. And because they have scoliosis, look at all that inflammation down there. That's a lot of inflammation. That's a lot of pain. That's a lot of difficulty playing sports, riding in cars, bending and lifting up children, doing day-to-day activities, sitting at a desk at work. Like, there's a lot of consequences to not having a healthy spine. I don't even need to know what those are. I just need to know that it's not appropriate. And then over time, we monitor that. And you can see how over the months of time, and each of these pictures are probably 3 months. The first two are only a month apart. If you look, it was from 5/18 to 6/24. And then over time, those reevaluations get spaced out. But you'll notice the most recent one, not so bad. That was in January this year. Pretty cool, right? Now, what impact does that have when you calm the scan down? This is the same person. Let me see if I have, oh, by the way, this is the imaging that we took on them. This was in the beginning. That's the follow-up. So we can see how the spine, see those circles, those orange circles, how they're kind of off to the side. See the two orange bars at the top, how they're kind of tilted? That's that head tilt I was talking about. This was the follow-up. Now that was, I think, 3 months into care, and that's what helped that spine to stand up straighter and calm those nerves down. There was also, I wanted to see if I have it here. Yeah. So this is how we gauge the impact that this is having, is we do what's called a quality of life assessment. So how do you think your body's performing? Who cares what I think? How do you think it is in terms of like pain and energy levels and emotional well-being? It's called a RAND 36 score. And so this would be the RAND 36 for that individual in the beginning. Anything under 50 we mark as red. Anything from, let's see, here's the fade over here. So orange is 50 to 64. I kind of look at it like a teacher, right? Like if I'm an A student, A or B, I'm green. That's pretty good, right? If I'm B to C, that's in the yellow. If I'm getting under 64, I'm going to my D's and my F's. That's no good, right? So I try to get people out of the reds if we can. But that was in the beginning of care. We had 4 red bars, 3 orange, and a yellow. And then over time, this was the most recent one. Still have some reds, but pain levels are not as great. 75 out of 100 is almost no pain. Like 100 would be no pain, right? General health is pretty good. Physical functioning, by the way, physical functioning started off 45, 65, 75, 85, down to, I think that's post-COVID, if I'm not mistaken. But over the holidays, but not bad. So we can kind of look at these metrics and see, you know, it's pretty important, right? We want to have the spine straight up and down and not crooked. And then what we do, I just showed you a picture of it a second ago. If we think the head and neck aren't lined up right, is we'll do some pretty intense imaging that looks basically like this. Now this is our employee Alyssa, and she's totally fine with me sharing her images. But this is a 3-dimensional scan where we're able to look at those bones to see, are they lined up right? Is one crooked? Is one not crooked? That way we can be extremely precise. There's no risk in our procedure. And what our procedure then does is we have people lie on their side and we correct the alignment. You know, so if someone had an accident, an injury throughout their life that's damaging the connection between the brain and the body, creating that pressure and inflammation, we can get in there very precisely and work to correct it, reduce the inflammation, get the center of gravity back, and improve the quality of life. And it goes back to our definitions, right? If I see the inflammation levels go down on the organ that controls your life and your health, I can only expect your health to go up, right? If I remove that pressure or irritation. And so we've seen, all kind of different conditions. It's not like we're treating the condition. We're treating the body that's struggling with that condition. See what I'm saying? Like if we're made in God's image, did God forget like the Tylenol gland? Did he forget to put in, these kind of things? And it's like, no, we just got to put the design back the way it was designed to be, maybe clean up our diet the way that was designed to be, clean up our environment. I mean, we're not living in the Garden of Eden anymore, right? So there are considerations, but our consideration is just we're doing a lot more damage physically to our body as well. Those car accidents, those sports, we are a lot more aggressive as a society, those birthing options, and that is a big, big variable in the pursuit of being as healthy as we can be. So, I am going to open up to questions in just a second because we're on the hour and it's time to go. It's time to eat. Those of you that are watching the live playback or whatnot, sorry, you don't get to have, what do we have, Aladdin's veggie rolls? It's going to be good. But there are two reasons I love doing this. Of course, for you guys that are here, I mean, I really, really, really love this work and I love sharing it. I think it's important. I think there's too many people that are running in circles trying to figure out how to manage their condition, but they're running at 80% or 50% capacity of what their body's potential is. You know what I mean? So any opportunity we have to share this stuff, I think it's important. But the other reason is because it's not just about us in the room. It's about the people that we probably thought of during the talk that are like, ooh, that reminds me of so-and-so. Oh, that reminds me of so-and-so. So-and-so should have been here. I wonder if they've heard about this. You know what I mean? So to that end, there's a couple things. I always want people to be aware. If you go onto Facebook and you look up Revive Results, it's a hashtag. I don't know how many people are familiar with using hashtags, but if you look up the hashtag Revive Results, there's all kind of information. Like these are some of the ones we were just talking about, where it shows people's quality of life being restored. But you can go there and you can look up conditions. Like you could look up on Facebook right now, let's say hashtag Revive Migraine. And anything that we've done in terms of that condition will be on there. I try and put things organized that way, so that way people can look it up, like, does this help with low back pain? I'll go on Facebook and look up Revive low back pain. Let's see. There's a couple posts there. Or if I just did back pain, I know I did a video on it. If you go and you look it up and there's not something on there, just let me know. And we'll put up some educational information on it. Usually it's research, things like that. The website's reviveucc.com. It's got a lot of really good information. But the point is, it would be a real disappointment and a failure on my part if we left our time together and kept it to ourselves, you know what I mean? It's almost like the city on a hill concept, right? Like, why would we want to keep good information to ourselves? If you know someone that's hurting and struggling, please share with them some of the information that you learned today. My support team wasn't able to join me, and normally we have a table with tons of information. We do have some cards, but I wanted to really show you those kind of resources. And then for you guys as well, I want to talk to you over lunch if you have any questions. There's a couple opportunities that I wanted to show you as well. I don't know how many people are into QR codes, but I'll put this on here. This QR code would take you to our consultation page where you can put in information and a member of our team will call you to schedule a free thermal screening. Remember that heat scan? We always offer a totally complimentary consultation and thermal screening analysis just to see if someone has that pressure, you know what I mean, if they got some issues there. But there was a couple things that I wanted to do in addition to that. And this is kind of time sensitive for the month of April, so I don't know how long the recording will be on YouTube or whatnot. But what I wanted to do was, if anyone from the church wanted to come and have our services, anything that you do with us in the month of April, we will gladly tithe back 10% back to the church. We're just going to keep a tally on whoever's coming in, and at the end of the month, we'll see what kind of services or payments that they've made, and we want to support your church for giving us the time to be here. And then on top of that, Miss Des and the Wright family are patients of ours. And one of the things we do with our patients is when they hit their first re-examination point, we give them 2 VIP cards, which are like $100 towards your intake services, right? I brought some of those today, so if you'd like one and you're here for coming and being here, that's sorry for those watching the playback, you don't get one of those right now. But if you'd like one of those cards, just ask Desiree today and we'll get you one. And those are good to the end of April as well. Just that way you guys have as much time as you want. But if you really could use it and you want to come and you're curious, the consult and screening are totally free. You know what I mean? But if you know, like, oh yeah, but I'm definitely going to need it, well then grab one of those cards. You know what I mean? And get started this month, because then we'll give back some to the church. But I've never been one to kind of like have fancy pitches or hard sales or anything. I legitimately just wanted to say thank you. And that is something that we do anyhow with our patients, is we always give them those little, it was originally designed for family members, like, because if you're a spouse or you're in the household, it was like a household discount. But then we had patients that maybe were widowers or didn't have family, but they had a neighbor that was like family. So those cards, we said, were good for anybody. You know what I mean? We weren't going to be Magnum PI and figure out who's family and who's not family. It's just, if you're a friend of our patients, you're good enough for us, right? So with that, I know we're going to eat. But before we close it down, are there any questions? Anything kind of like aha moments, or, you know, anything you ever have any weird questions for chiropractors, but you never knew what to ask? You know, we were talking earlier about chiropractic is still kind of a little bit in the alternative, so some people always wonder about it and whatnot. You know, I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys have. What do we got? Someone's got to have one. Yeah.
How young are your youngest patients?
How young? And by the way, I'll repeat that question, but next person who has a question, while I'm answering this one, raise your hands, because we've got a mic, so that way people that are watching remotely will get that. But the question was, how young are our youngest patients? I suppose the youngest patient that I unofficially evaluated was my own child, and it was within a day of their birth. It was like the day of, you know. Officially, the youngest was another patient of mine who had a child that brought them to the office on their way home from the hospital. So they were probably under a week old. And we did that temperature check, where we checked the spine, we checked the balance. The difference with kids is that we don't do the imaging, the 3-dimensional imaging, and the procedure is even more gentle than it is with an adult. With an infant, we apply a pressure with the tip of our hand that's about the same pressure that you would feel confident squeezing a tomato. So it's not a lot of pressure, but it's a wonderful thing with kids because they don't have the years of compensations, all the different medications. I mean, they're like a brand new car right off the lot, you know what I mean? So they should respond quickly, you know what I mean? I love taking care of the kiddos. So yeah, it's a good question. Another question.
I was wondering, do you help with gut health issues in general?
Yeah, so we always start with I have these mugs that we have a new kind of slogan for our office, and that is that healing starts at the top, because that's where the brain is, right? So, and we have some wonderful gut products in our office. We carry a line called Orthomolecular, which is a physician pharmaceutical grade line of products that's satisfaction guaranteed. Like, you could take a fish oil, and if it upset your stomach, bring it back, you get a full refund. So it's like really good, high quality stuff. But before we do that, we make sure that there's no pressure at the top. And the reason is because there is this nerve called the vagus nerve, and it controls your gut. So very often, if you have compression of that vagus nerve, my mom, like I said, got me into chiropractic because she was more natural. One of the downsides was supplemental intervention can almost be like medicine intervention, where you have a vitamin for every problem, you know what I mean? So we always start with the top. But like, take for example this gentleman here, all the way to the right, in the hoodie right there. And that's on our YouTube page. You can look him up. His name's John. He had multiple concussions in high school playing football, blackout concussions. He developed ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease. It was Crohn's, which involves ulcers, but his technical diagnosis was Crohn's. And they didn't know why. But long story short, his Crohn's went into remission for the first time before we even touched any of our products. We were just working with calming his nerves down, and his gut just like, all that inflammation just started settling. Because if you're out of alignment, your body is in that fight or flight mode where it's just everything's inflamed, your body's overreacting to everything. And if you can calm that down, and now he uses a couple products that help the gut heal. We have a product called GluteShield, which helps the lining of the gut. It's awesome. So yeah, that's the long answer. I don't know any short answers. I'm always long-winded, but yeah. So yes, we do. What else we got? I think
I have
the
a
mic.
question for
Yes.
these two ladies are wondering about insurance.
Sure.
And then I was explaining to them about how when we went in and you give a plan and so you can make different payments. Could you explain all that?
Sure. Yeah, so in healthcare, we talked about how anything that's designed to enhance your health isn't covered that well. Not as well as crisis care. You know what I mean? It's almost like you're better off having a heart attack. And in chiropractors for 100 years have kind of had 1 foot in and 1 foot out. You know what I mean? And what that looks like clinically with most chiropractic and physical therapy is a lot of different, when you're in network, a lot of different modalities. And not even in chiropractic and physical therapy, in hospitals. Anytime you go to the doctor and you come back, if you got the copy of your bill, there's actually multiple things that are being billed, you know? And the more specialized you get, like us, the less we can submit to an insurance. You know what I mean? And so you'll find that upper cervical specialists tend to be out of network, where we still submit receipts to your insurance, but everybody pays the clinic directly. And that's just because we don't do all the ancillary extra therapies that don't usually work in the long run anyhow. They're sort of like short-term management things like e-stim and ultrasound, and that's good in the short term, but for the chronic stuff, it's not as effective. The other way that people can be in network and survive is through volume. So they have, hundreds of clients a day, where with us, it's kind of one at a time. I mean, we get busy, but it's not that crazy. So that's the long answer to why we're out of network. So then to get to the question, when you're out of network and you go to see a doctor that's out of network, that's basically you pay at the time of service. They give you a receipt to submit to your insurance. We submit receipts for our patients, And so it would go under what's called the out-of-network benefits. So once you pay a certain amount, the insurance might send you something back. But assuming they don't send anything back, the way our fees work is the initial consultation and screening are totally free, just to see what's going on. That fancy CT scan that does all the 3D stuff, that's part of our intake exam. And the intake exam includes a lot of stuff. It includes the back scans, the range of motion, the posture, a lot of the things that we talked about. And normally that's $375, but with that certificate that we have, it would be $275. And then after that, it kind of depends on what you need. At the end of the day, our regular office fees are anywhere from $60 to $70. It depends on how you take care of it financially. But we really try and pride ourselves on people needing less and less care as they go. Because you don't want to be I don't want people dependent on chiropractic care, just like I would rather them not be dependent on Tylenol. Like, you shouldn't have to have it every week for the rest of your life. You should be able to span it out and find that happy medium, you know what I mean? Where you can kind of be a good steward over your spine and know when you need to get adjusted, when you can kind of coast, that sort of thing. So it really depends on the case, but those are kind of our fundamental fees. And then after that, it just kind of depends person to person what they need. So, do I have a question over here? 3 questions, all right.
It's on? Oh.
There we go.
Right. So the first question is for our mental health.
Mm-hmm.
Shiloh's mom told me I could ask you anything.
You can ask me anything. Open
Right.
book. Let's go.
Right, so it's for schizophrenia, for someone who doesn't want to take conventional medicine.
Yeah.
She would rather cure herself naturally. I heard that you could refer someone, or maybe you would have answers to how she could get treated without having to take Western we're in the West, right?
That's right, yeah. Western medicine would be like,
medicine, right.
yeah.
Question number 2, what do you recommend for persons who have a tough time getting over their mood? I know that our diet has a lot to do with that, and then we're living here in Pennsylvania where we only get sunshine a lot in the summer.
Yeah.
And Vicky and Valek's mom, right, was telling me that taking vitamin D is good for that. That's the second question. 3, Dejan told me, that's my son, told me to ask you what is happening with his face, his neck. Every now and again, for the past few days, he's been feeling like a slight throbbing. This morning, I told him maybe he's sleeping bad on that side.
How old is he?
He's 12.
Yeah.
Right.
So, good questions. We'll start with the easy one first, which is the last one, and then we'll work up to the schizophrenia one. That's the harder one. A sore neck can be caused by a lot of things. A lot of people they're on the hunt for the perfect pillow. You know what I mean? I don't know if you know anyone like that buys all kind of pillows trying to find the perfect pillow. The reality is that it's if your spine is malleable, can bend and flex and move, then the pillow shouldn't make or break you. But if you're out of alignment and things are stuck and not moving as well, then how you sleep, the quality of your pillow, the quality of your mattress can really affect how you wake up, whether you have a headache or a stiff neck. So it might be something as basic as that, plus they're growing. So kids all have their aches and pains all over the place. And then there's a more complicated issue called Torticollis, which is where your neck literally bends you to the side and you can't straighten it out. So it kind of depends on a few factors. My thought would be to stand him up against the wall, have him march in place, and you evaluate, see how he's doing. Check his thumbs to see if one's higher or lower. If you put on a pair of glasses, that pair of glasses should also be level. Like if you put a marble on the top of the glasses, it shouldn't roll to the right, it shouldn't roll to the left. If you're from the side, that pair of glasses the marble shouldn't roll down, it shouldn't roll back. You know what I mean? The eyes and the ears are very good indicators for how level your head is. So you could do a little evaluating yourself and see. And then, like I said, I sincerely mean it. You can come up and have that thermal scan. We are not going to pressure you into anything. Someone can come up, have the scan, and say, nice to meet you, see you later. It's totally okay, But I would start there because that's more of the obvious. Yeah?
Tell them about the sleeping thing that you told Beecher with walking around with your head like this.
Oh, yeah. So when we talk about sleep postures, I always ask people, how do they sleep? Do you sleep on your side? Do you sleep on your back? The only one you're not allowed to answer is your stomach. Because if you sleep on your stomach, you're sleeping for 6 to 8 hours with your head cranked to the side. You know what I mean? So now imagine walking around like this all day. You know what I mean? If you're just walking around like this, after a while, your neck would get pretty sore. It's kind of crazy. And by the way, side sleeping, if you look at someone straight on, the distance from the side of the neck to the shoulders, that distance should be about as high as your pillow is if you're a side sleeper. Most people's pillows are like this big, or they start this big, but they're so soft, they just go straight down. So now when I go to sleep on my side, if the pillow doesn't hold me up, my head does this, or my shoulder does this, or I do this. So now I'm like this for 8 hours. You know what I mean? Like, that's terrible. So depending on how someone's sleeping, that could be a factor. But if there's a crick in the neck or a misalignment in the spine, as important as it is to fix the sleeping posture, that crick will always be there. And that's something that needs to be corrected chiropractically. Like, you stretch and you can hear pops and clicks in your spine. You know what I mean? This part of your spine can do that really well. This part has a really hard time because the head is very heavy, the neck bones are very small, and the muscles that hold it all together are really small and delicate. So it's just hard. It's hard to fix this. You know what I mean? The second issue was the mood. Vitamin D for sure. But it really, again, it depends. There are all kind of adrenal supports. The adrenal glands are what kind of help you adapt to stress. So we have a couple products that help with that. But similar to what I was saying before, if your brain thinks there's an emergency when there's not an emergency, after a while your adrenals just give up, and now you're in chronic fatigue mode. You know what I mean? So like depression, fatigue, mood, anger, all these kind of things are when the body just has zero tolerance. You know what I mean? That thermostat is just done. You know what I mean? Zero tolerance. So it all kind of, like I said, we always start at the top, and then there are products to help. But the easy go-tos are, vitamin D is a big mood regulator, So vitamin D is great. 3,000 to 5,000 IUs a day of vitamin D is pretty good. Your B complexes are important too, just for your nervous system and your brain. And then the other thing is exercise. Physically moving your body will literally stimulate the front of your brain, which is where depression, anxiety, and things come from when you don't have stimulation, right? The frontal lobe is your personality. It's how nice you are, it's how understanding, how patient, it's all here. And the lack of movement kind of like suffocates this part of your brain. So just forcing yourself to go for a walk, yes, when you don't feel like it, is like a drug. You can't help but feel a little bit better if you just go walk for 8 minutes, 10 minutes. You know what I mean? So there are those kind of strategies. And then the last thing, the schizophrenic question is an interesting one because the chiropractic profession actually had a mental hospital at one time. It was called the Clearview Sanitarium, and or Sanatorium, I'm not sure how you pronounce those, but in Iowa, which is where the chiropractic profession's from. And it was all kind of mental disorders, you know. And medicine evolved, I don't know what era that was, but as medicine evolved at getting better at treating things, more people fell away from natural options, you know what I mean? So it kind of shut down. But I love any opportunity to help anybody with some of these more fringe issues because, I mean, with all due respect, anyone can crack a back. That's not what excites me. You know what I mean? And by the way, our procedure doesn't involve any turning, snapping, or cracking of the bones. But that's not what got me into the work. Like, I got into this work for people that have the more complex health issues. And one of the biggest misunderstandings, I guess it's a misunderstanding about the spine, is just how important it is for the health of your brain. Like, your oxygen, your arteries, and everything pulse in and out of your neck to nourish your brain. The cerebral spinal fluid is like the squeegee to a wet window. It's what cleans your brain when you sleep. And if you've got a misalignment in here and those systems aren't running properly, then very often you get mental fatigue, you get headache, you get brain fog, and over time, not to say that that's the root cause of things like schizophrenia, but if you have schizophrenia and you have these issues, it's a heck of a lot harder to deal with. You know what I mean? And that's like Parkinson's or MS or seizures. Some people do really well under care with those issues, and some people do okay with those issues. Either way, for that person, it's awesome because they have this really hard diagnosis that no one else can barely touch. So any amount of like relief is like a game changer for them because they've been told there's nothing else I can do for you. Go home, take these medications, and live out your life subpar. So it's sort of like if we can just raise that par, if we can raise that ability to function just by X amount of percentage for that person, it's a big deal. So it's hard to say without seeing them, but we're always up for seeing them. You know what I mean? Those types of folks. What's that? Oh, in that case, shoot me an email. I don't have it on my website now. I had a referral map on my website at one point, but there's another website that I'll go to right now called ucreferral.com. So it stands for Upper Cervical Referral. And what you'll find on this map are upper cervical doctors, upper cervical chiropractors. And so like in Pittsburgh, there's only a handful, right? Now, if you go under status, there are people like myself that have a diplomate. And a diplomate in upper cervical, this website needs to be updated. There's probably about 20 of us now, 20, 30 of us. And that's people that have a really good understanding of the brain and everything else. But as long as you're board certified in an upper cervical procedure, you should be on this map. And then, by the way, the technique, you can filter. There's different techniques that do this type of work. I do what's known as the Blair work. So if you were to filter Blair, that would be people who do similar to what I do. But anybody should be good, you know what I mean, if they're on this map, UC Referral. So there are some in Canada. And again, this map may not be complete, but what I would suggest would be the person can look at ucreferral.com, and if they can't find anyone, then they can email me at Dr. Bulow, where is it at the top there, drbulow@reviveucc.com, and we could see who's in their area, you know. So what else we got? Yes?
I'm probably the one you want to talk to if you want complex.
Oh, yeah. Fair enough.
I have everything from side sleeping to an endo system that's been attacked with the autoimmune.
Mm-hmm.
I think it all started when I went overseas and drank a lot of different waters overseas and did a lot of traveling.
Yeah.
That's when we started noticing it. But I guess a couple of the questions is, does your supplements provide ingredients? It's the first thing my endocrinologist always asks. Don't take anything unless we know what's in that bottle, because it reacts with your other medicines. So I'm wondering if that is your case.
Oh, definitely. The brand that we use is orthomolecular. So it's not even, I don't private label or custom compound anything. Like upper cervical care is what I mainly do, but we have these products because they, long story short, it got my daughter off of an inhaler and a Singular at night. They have a product that for histamine reactions, and I was so enamored by that I just said, all right, fine, you can come in, you know. And we've been learning as we go, but it's not. It's definitely, it's all on the label. The web, they've got tons of independent testing. It's one of the better product lines out there, but you could look it up. Your endocrinologist could look it up. Orthomolecular is the name of it. Yeah.
I know you touched a little bit on the coverage with insurance.
Mm-hmm.
Are your products covered through a pharmacy benefit, or?
Not that I know of. Since we as a facility are out of network, we do everything out of network. Now there are codes for different therapeutic procedures, like our adjustments and our clinical office visits. I'd have to see if there are codes specific to those products. I'm not sure if they are referenced that way in that medical system or not. I don't know. Yeah, that's something we could look into for you though.
Okay.
What else we got besides grumbling tummies? Ready? Another question? Or you can pray us over to dinner or lunch.
So if there are no other questions, then we want to thank you very much
Absolutely.
for being able to come out and speak with us.
That was a
and go
pleasure.
through your presentation. It's been extremely interesting and informational.
Good.
So,
I hope so.
and it's always reassuring that, like, God intended us to be able to heal ourselves.
Mhm.
So I appreciate that you were talking earlier about, like, not taking anything away, not adding anything to,
Yeah.
being able to work with God.
Yeah, absolutely.
So thank you everyone for coming out on it was snowier.
It was a
earlier.
little treacherous this morning, yeah.
Yes. So we will have grace over the food in the back. Everyone is welcome to come and join us for a light luncheon in the back. And thank you for everyone in the hands that helped with preparing it.
Yeah.
So
We'll chat more there,
yes,
right?
please keep the questions coming.
That's right. We'll see you guys there. We'll go get a bite to eat.